Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Friday afternoon, and we have some big basketball news to talk about. I mentioned this before in the fifth segment in yesterday's podcast. If you guys were tuning into that, then you probably already know this, but the first segment is going to be about Steph Curry and the new contract that he signed with the Golden State Warriors. And I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that in the first segment and what this means for his future, what this could mean for Golden State. And then in the second segment, I'm going to talk about the Southwestern Division and how I would feel if I was a fan of each and every single one of the teams. And then in the third segment, I'm going to continue talking about all of those teams, and I'm going to make a prediction on what I think their wins and losses are going to be for the regular season. Then in the fourth segment, I'm going to talk about Tyronn Lue and his expectations for this off season, given how the Clippers, a lot of people really think that the Clippers poorly spent their off season, but I'm just going to go ahead and talk about Tyronn Lue's opinions on that. Then in the fifth segment, I'm going to be continuing talking about a player who I feel like didn't deserve to win an MVP in a specific year. So we're done with the 90s. We ended off with the year 1989. So we're going a little bit farther back in time to some players that, maybe the casual fan might not know about. And so I'm just going to go ahead and I'll explain a little bit more about that in the fifth segment. And before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we do love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you have a hot take, something you've been dying to share, or just a burning question. We're all ears. The show is all about keeping the conversation lively and making sure that your voice is a part of the mix. And if you really want to make sure that your comment or question gets noticed, go ahead and use Super Chat. Just hit the $ below the chat box, send in your message, and it'll be guaranteed to get featured on the show. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below in the ticker of every show segment, as well as the link displayed below in the description, gsmcpodcast.net, to really help the show. Either or, doesn't matter. Your comment or question will get recognized if you use either the link or if you use Super Chat. So with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and go into this first segment, which is going to be about Steph Curry and his huge contract with the Golden State Warriors. This makes him, once again, the most paid player in the NBA. And the contract is only for 2 years. It's only for 1 year, and it goes into the 2027 season. And he's going to be making it's a $62.6 million extension. So this is, the tweet, according to Woj, said Golden State Warriors star Steph Curry has agreed on a 1-year, $62.6 million extension that'll keep him under contract through the 2026-2027 NBA season. His agent, Jeff Austin of Octaga, told ESPN, Octaga, however you call it, I'm not entirely sure how you call it. Now, Curry, he has 2 years remaining on his contract, but he reportedly wanted to get an extension sometime by this summer. But the 36-year-old guard has $178 million guaranteed over the next 3 years over the deal with his contract. So Golden State, they may have wanted to extend him for a little bit longer, given how right now it doesn't seem like their championship window is as open as it was in previous years. So if considering how Steph Curry only signed for 1 year, it might be like a hint that he's going to try and abandon ship and maybe go join some other team in the offseason. in 2027 as opposed to re-signing with the Warriors in another contract. Like, excuse me, this is a lot of money to be paying for a specific player, and the Golden State Warriors are probably going to be heading way over the luxury tax if they want to be able to sign a bunch of good players, and if they want to be able to retain Steph, considering how much money he is making within these past few years, it's not going to be any easier to do that with the amount of money that he's going to be making. Now, NBA's over 38 rule per ESPN Bobby Marks means that the extension is limited to 1 year as a result of this rule. So, under the NBA collective bargaining agreement, teams cannot offer contracts lasting 4 or more years to players who are more than 38 years old or will turn 38 during the contract. So Steph Curry is going to turn 38 in 2026 at the start of the extension. So this is like the biggest reason why Steph couldn't sign a much larger contract with the Golden State Warriors. So it might not have been due to it might not have been because of loyalty issues. It might have just been because of rules. So there might not be anything for Warriors fans to worry about anyway. But obviously, if you can't retain your best player for several years, that's going to worry a lot of fans, especially if your team isn't really getting that much better as the years progress. And I understand that, Steph, you might think that, winning 4 championships, that's totally fine. That's enough. You can go about your career as being named as the best shooter in NBA history and having 4 championships to your name. But somebody like him and players like him, they want more. Like there's never not a chance, I guess you could say. There's always a chance. Like if you have Steph on the team, if Steph feels confident in his abilities, then he's always going to try to win. And if he feels confident that he's going to win, but if he was on a different team, then there would be nothing stopping him from picking up a contract from another team and winning over there. There would literally be nothing stopping him, since they only have him under contract for they've only added him under contract for 1 more year due to this rule. So Curry, again, he spent his entire career with the Golden State Warriors after being drafted in 2009. And Golden State said he wanted to be, Curry has said that he's wanted to be a Warrior for life. But time will tell. Now, I'm sure that this is just, I'm sure that the biggest reason why he didn't sign a huge contract with the Warriors, like a longer contract so that, you could have him for a couple more years, is because of the fact that you can't sign a big time, an old NBA player like him for so many years at a time. Like you just can't do that. And at least, according to that rule. Now, let me know in the comments what you guys think of that rule. Do you think that rule is just a bunch of bogus? Would you rather see that rule removed? Would you rather see Steph Curry on a completely different team? Would you rather like to see Steph maybe pair up with some other players? Would you mind seeing Steph take a pay cut? Do you want to see Steph stay back on the Warriors and try to win another ring for Golden State? There's so many options that he's going to be able to have once he becomes a free agent in 2027. So let me know in the comments exactly what you think will happen. Now, the big question now, I guess, is if the Warriors even have a chance in winning anything for this year, which I think is an extremely far-fetched idea. And it's probably going to be down to Steve Kerr and his rotations and, just being a much better coach with his lineup than he was in definitely was in Team USA. Jesus Christ, like don't even get me started with that. But again, it's like you have Steph Curry for a couple more years. You have to figure out how to make the best possible lineup for him, and how to manage him for as long as you have him. Now, we know that Steph, he recently removed Warriors from his Instagram bio, and he seemed like he is going to be trying to join LeBron, which is always like a scare for the Warriors, and now it's all the more possible. But like given the fact that he only extended for 1 year, this makes it even more possible. So his extension is technically a 3-year deal, because the 2 pre-existing years plus the $62 million for 2026 and 2027. So this is the longest contract he could sign for with the Golden State Warriors, and this is all because of that over 38 rule. Now, for a player with over 10 years of experience, the max salary is $49.2 million, to put it in perspective. So Curry is going to earn more than that for this season at $55.8 million. And again, that is a huge amount of money to be paying. Now, when a player with full bird rights re-signs with a team, they can get up to the league or personal max 105% of the prior salary cap. And Curry has been earning for a long time with the Warriors, and is earning about $6.6 million above the league max. Now, the most a player can extend for is 140% of their expiring salary, but 83.4% is way over the league and personal maxes. So he's limited to 105%, but I mean, big deal. Like, big deal. And this is why his extension is going to be for $62.6 million in 2026 and 2027. So just a little bit of context on why Steph was paid the amount he was paid, in case any of you guys have questions. If you have any more questions, I'll do my best to answer those in the comments, both live as well as the comments that I get later when I upload these segments. So with this out of the way, we can go ahead and go into a break, and then start our second segment, where I talk about the Southwestern Conference teams and how I feel about them going into this next season, if I was a fan of either one of these teams. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, I'm going to be talking about the Southwestern Division, how I would feel if I was a fan of these teams, how I would feel going into this season, and what to expect going into this season, what are my highs, what are my lows, all of the, all the important stuff that you might need to know going into the season. And before I begin, though, I do like to remind everybody that we do love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you have a burning question, a hot take for the game, or something that you've been dying to say, we're all ears. This show is about keeping the conversation lively and making sure that your voice is part of the mix. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then you can go ahead and use the super chat feature and just click the $ below the chat box and you can send in your message that way, and it really helps the show, and you'll definitely be able to hear from the message like live during the show. It'll definitely get mentioned, and if super chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and send in your comment that way and send in your donation that way as well. And it really helps the show. Again, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, you can either use the super chat or you could use the link displayed below the ticker on the show segment. So with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and start with this segment, which is going to be talking about all of the teams in the Southwestern Division, how I should feel about how I would feel about these teams if I was a fan of these teams, how I would feel going into the next season, what to expect, what not to expect, and just the important stuff to note. Like, I've been doing this for a majority of the teams in each of their respective divisions. So this one, I believe this is the final division, but if I missed one, I'll quickly go ahead and cover that one in the next podcast. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and talk about these teams. Now, these teams are a little bit mixed. There's not really many successful teams. Like, actually, I can't really say that it's mixed, honestly. Like, the only successful team that was on this that's on this list is the Dallas Mavericks, and even then they finished the regular season at the number 5 seed. But aside from finishing the regular season at the 5th seed, they finished arguably the second best in the entire postseason. They lost in the NBA Finals to the Boston Celtics, and they lost in 5 games. Obviously, that was it was a little bit embarrassing. Kyrie didn't really play that well. Luka Doncic played about as well as he possibly could. And the rest of the role players, they also didn't really play that well. So it was really just Luka Doncic against the Boston Celtics. And when you go up against a team that has as much talent and as much offensive power and defensive power as the Boston Celtics do, it's very difficult to keep up. But aside from that, the Boston Celtics, they still retain the main players that they had last season, as well as being able to retain the 2 main players that they need, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. And you could argue that the Dallas Mavericks ended up coming back better than ever. And they upgraded in the offseason. They got Klay Thompson, and Kyrie Irving was apparently a huge part of acquiring Klay Thompson in free agency, so props to Kyrie for that. And they really have to make sure that Kyrie Irving ends up working out for this team, because if he doesn't end up working out, then that could be a huge waste in not only just roster space, but also contract, because of the money that Klay Thompson is going to be making for the season. Now, it's not a huge amount of money that many people believe that he should that he should have been making or he could have been making, but it's still a huge amount of money that they're gonna have to pay him for a couple of years, and for the amount of years that they have him, as well as the rest of these, as Luka and Kyrie Irving, they're gonna have to make sure that this works. And they after the deadline last year, the standard for this season is at least going having a better start than 21-9, because that was their start for last season in the like before the break and before the deadline or after the deadline. That was when they started going on that ridiculous win streak, 21-9. But it's like if they could start out a little bit better than 21-9 in the beginning of the season, then maybe they can have a lot better success. But like the small forward position is a little bit weak for them. I guess like maybe, Klay Thompson being at the small forward position, depending on where they put him at, is going to make it slightly better. But again, the depth at the small forward position is a little bit lacking. Now, next team on this list is the Portland Trailblazers. CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Zion Williamson, and Brandon Ingram. They're all on the team now. But last year, the Pelicans, they ended up earning the 8th seed after winning the game in the play-in. And Zion went down to injury, so they did not have Zion for the postseason, which was unfortunate for them. They ended up getting swept by the Thunder in the first round. And, it doesn't really... from the perspective of them getting swept, it doesn't really seem like they're contending. But the moves that they made for this offseason, acquiring DeJounte, it seems like they are trying to contend, but it doesn't feel like they are. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like the moves that they made, DeJounte is a pretty, you'd think he's a pretty huge acquisition, but then, the season comes and he doesn't, and it just turns out to be a repeat of the last season. That's really the vibe that you get from this team. You don't feel like there's immediate change, I don't think. Zion is 24, Brandon Ingram is 26, and they realistically, with those ages, with the ages that they have and the amount of experience that they have in the league, they can't be up next anymore with the current roster that they have. They can't really contend with Brandon Ingram. It doesn't seem like he's going to be a long-term, in any of the long-term plans for their contending seasons. And, it seems like things would need to change. And, which is why I'm, a little bit surprised that they did not end up trading Brandon Ingram in one of these trades to maybe try to acquire someone else. It is a little bit surprising to me, but, aside from that, you can't really complain about having it's a really weird spot where Brandon Ingram is right now, because it's you can't complain about having him on the roster, but at the same time, is he really doing much for your roster? That still is left to be desired, I guess you could say. And it's you can't really answer that question as of right now. So next team on the list is the Houston Rockets. They were the 11th seed in the Western Conference last season. They were more on a rebuilding aspect of the for the Western Conference, and they were more of a rebuilding team for the entire NBA. Now, the question now, I guess, is that is it time for your players and your young players on your team to finally take that next step and become better than they were in the previous season, and maybe even secure a playoff spot? Because it's year 2 for the young core that they already have, and they have a pretty decent set of veterans to match up with these young players and to sort of learn from these players, which is one of the things that is a little bit underrated. You always need to have some of these veteran players on your team to be able to guide some of these young players into having a healthy career in the league. And the play-in is most likely going to be a battle for this team and any other team that they match up against. And that's really that leaves things to be in question. Is Sengun going to be able to be that guy? And I'm not really sure if he's going to be able to do that unless he develops a 3-point shot. Because if he develops that, then it's it's a game over for the rest of the league. And it's the rest of the players. Dylan Brooks, I'm not a big fan of him, but he's increased his scoring lately, so maybe he can do it again for this season. Fred VanVleet, I mentioned he was one of the league's more underrated players. I still stand by that opinion, and I do think that he is a pretty decent player in the NBA. And again, I think he's underrated. But we do have to see how they perform in this incredibly competitive Western Conference. Most of the league's best players come from the Western Conference and are in the Western Conference right now, and they're playing in the Western Conference. So it's like the competition did not get much easier, given the amount of time that they're taking to get better. Like when James Harden was on Houston, they would make the playoffs every single year, but it's like now it's not really guaranteed. And that's obviously, that's what you get when you lose prime Harden, but that was going to be bound to happen anyway. Next team on this list is the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, they were the 13th seed in last season, but a huge reason why they were such a low seed is because for a majority of the year they did not have Ja Morant. They had him for a little bit when he returned from his suspension, but then he got injured. So they didn't have him for a majority of the last year, which was not an exciting thing for Memphis. That's the reason. That's part of the reason why they were a 13th seed. So honestly, a lot of teams and a lot of people and a lot of fans, they're probably going to be a little bit on the low, I guess, not really on the low, but on the ill-informed side of Memphis, and they're really they're not going to expect much coming from them this season. But excuse me. I mean, with Ja Morant on the team, I feel like that changes a lot for not only just the team's morale, but also the team's ability to win. I think it changes it a lot more than a lot of than a lot of players think and a lot of other fans really think. Again, he only played 9 games last season, which is, again, it's not a lot of games in the slightest at all. And I mean, I wouldn't really say that he had a great season, and I wouldn't really say that Memphis had a great season at all. But it's when Ja Morant is on the team and when he's playing in these games, Memphis has always, more than not, they've always been in these playoff conversations. All it takes is Ja Morant to play on the court, and they eventually they start winning. It doesn't matter who's on the team. All that matters is that you get Ja the ball, and he's able to make plays, and those plays are what you need in order to win games. And when you're winning games, that's really the only important thing. That's really the only important thing at the end of every single regular season. At least in my opinion, if you're able to win the important games, and if you're able to win in these games, then it's that you did what you needed to do, and it's there's nothing else that can be said. There's nothing else that needs to be said, and there's nothing else that you really have to really worry about. Now, Ja in the 9 games that he played, I don't have his the exact record of the games that that he won in, but I mean, in the games that he's missed, you can really tell that there weren't a lot of wins for Memphis in that previous season, which is a big reason why they need Ja Morant healthy and available for a majority of this season if they expect some sort of fantastic good season ahead of them. But I'd say if everyone is going to sleep on them, then it's less expectation makes a team that much better. And it's like, with the pieces that they have around them, it's not like they can't be a good squad. I mean, with Jared, with Desmond Bain, and some of the best young trios some of the best young three players in the entire league, like on the exact same team. So it's like, I mean, they're always going to be a threat. And like that's why I said that this conference is a little bit weird, because it's like it's full of so many like young teams, and they didn't really play well last season, but they have a potential to be very, very dangerous in this coming season, especially the next team that I mentioned, the San Antonio Spurs with Victor Wembanyama. Like, they didn't play well last season at all. They ended up getting the 14th seed in the regular season. But in the end of the day, I mean, if I'm a Spurs fan, I'm happy regardless. Like, it doesn't matter. I got Wemby, baby. Like, the next few years are just like, they're going to be just, you're guaranteed a superstar caliber player for the next few years. And like, you're basically stress free for that time. Wemby is the answer, and to all the problems that you have. As long as you do a decent job in building a team around him, the Spurs will be fine. And that's another reason why they could be a really dangerous team in the next season, because it's like, if they figure it out now, if they figure it out quick, if Wemby figures it out quick, then they could be extremely dangerous. And, that the same thing I said with Houston, if Sengun can figure it out, they could also be pretty dangerous. And Memphis has already figured it out with those young players that they have. And I already mentioned that the Mavs have already figured out with the young players that they have. And really the only team that needs to figure it out now is the Pelicans, and even then, they made it to the postseason last year. They didn't win a game, but they made it to the postseason last year. And it's like, that's why I said this is one of the weirder conferences in the beginning. I knew I took it back, and I said that they were like, majority of the teams were like losing and things of that nature, so it wasn't really that interesting, I guess. But at the same time, it's like, they do all have, every single one of these teams, they all have the potential of being a very dangerous team in the Western Conference. And I mean, a lot of them, you could argue they already have found their best player on the team, and you could argue that they already found their leading star. I mean, with the Dallas Mavericks, you have Luka. With the Pelicans, I don't have him up here, but there's Zion. But I mean, he's been injured, but he's expected to be pretty healthy for this season. And then for Houston, you have Sengun for the future. Here you have Ja, and for San Antonio, you have Victor Wembanyama. Every single one of these players, they all have the potential of being the number one option, and they all have a shot of winning an NBA championship in either the near future or in the future. So it's like, anything can happen with a lot of these teams. And speaking of anything can happen with a lot of these teams, next thing that I'm going to do is, after this break, I'm going to go ahead and do a prediction of these teams and what their win-loss record is going to be. So I'm going to talk about every single one of these teams, and I'm going to give an explanation as to why I think they're going to have this record, or why I think they're going to have that record. I'm going to do all of that in the third segment right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, I'm going to be talking about the same division that I was talking about in the last segment. So the same teams I'm going to go over. But this time I'm going to be talking about what I think their win-loss record is going to be going into the next season. So let's go ahead and start off with the Dallas Mavericks again. So like I said before, it's the same team, so I might as well go ahead in the same order. If you want more details about these about this team and like what they did last season, you can go ahead and if you're on the audio side, you can go back to the last segment, or if you're on the video side, you could, if you're watching this from the live stream, you can just rewind over to that second segment, or you can, if you're watching this from the, like just on a video, then you can go back to, like you can go scroll to the basketball playlist, the GSMC Basketball Podcast playlist, and then you can find the Southwestern Division, you can find the Southwestern Division like opinions that I have of the team and where they were last season and what I think they're going to do this coming season. But aside from that, the Mavericks, I think they're going to finish this season with a record of 51 and 31. I have my notes up here with like all the records that to all these teams that I think, like, so, like, let me just go ahead and pull that up real quick. Just give me 1 second. So, I also have an article pulled up as well, like, that has a couple of stats, but, yeah, so I think the Mavericks last season, they went 50 and 32, but I think for this season, they're going to win one extra game and they're going to go 51 and 31. And like they came off of a very unexpected trip to the finals. So I think they're like they're going to feel pretty confident about their spot in the NBA right now for this season. Not to mention the fact that they acquired Klay Thompson for the regular season. I think that they'll be able to still be like Kyrie and Luka. I think they'll still be proven to be a very dynamic force in the NBA. And I think they're going to be a problem against every single team like that they go up against. Like it doesn't matter who they go up against, they're going to be putting every single team on notice, and I think that's a pretty respectable record to give them. Let me know in the comments if you guys think that I'm being a little bit generous of these guys, if you guys think that I would that they may be a little bit better than this record. Do you think they might be a little bit worse than this record? Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments, but let me just go ahead and pull up the next team. So the Pelicans, now this was a little bit of a weird team for me to do because, again, like I mentioned before, they do have a very interesting lineup with CJ, DeJounte, and having Zion and Brandon Ingram as well. But it's really it's like you have to sort of get this lineup to work, and figuring out how to get the lineup to work in the first year is going to be a lot to ask, especially in this incredibly top heavy Western Conference, not to mention just how competitive their division is already. And, oh, wait a minute. So I just got a tweet from, Woes just tweeted something. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into a breaking news segment real quick. So just give me 1 second. All right, so TJ McConnell for the Pacers ended up signing a 4-year, $45 million contract extension with the Pacers. And I guess that's a decent amount of money. Obviously, that's not like a hefty amount of dollars like we've seen recently with Steph Curry signing that extension with the Warriors. But I mean, that's still a decent amount of money for a decent player. Just wanted to, let everyone know and let everyone, stay a little updated in the entire situation. So aside from that, let's continue on with this third segment. So we left off with the Pelicans. Again, I said they were a weird team. They do have a very good talent on paper, but out off the paper and on the court is a very different story. We see this with the Clippers. We see this with the what other teams do we see this with? I can't even say we see this with the Celtics now because, they recently won. But we see this with the 76ers, and we see this with so many other teams. I mean, I could go by NFL, for example. We see this with the Cowboys, and it's they have great players and great stats on paper, but it's when it matters most and when they perform, it's just not it. And I think the Pelicans team, despite the talent that I mentioned and despite the fact that I do want Zion to succeed in this league, I don't think they're going to really be that well in this conference. That well. Again, I think they're going to be decent. I think they're going to be 46-36 in this regular season as opposed to the previous regular season where they went hold on just 1 second. I believe the Pelicans in the previous season they went 49-33. Yeah, they did. So 46-36. I think they're going to end up being a little bit worse than they were this last year, mainly because of the new chemistry adjustments, as well as just the fact that the Western Conference is getting a little bit more competitive. Now, they spent much of the summer trying to move Brandon Ingram, but presumably for a starting caliber center. But with Valanciunas and Larry Nance Jr. gone, they don't really have a reliable center for this team, which is one of the biggest discomforting things about this team, and one of the biggest reasons why I'm not entirely confident about this team really playing that well. But now they do have an all-star point guard in DeJounte, so that's something. But again, not having a center is a pretty big deal. But that's my opinion on this team. So again, 46-36. Let me know what you guys think. Next team on this list is the Houston Rockets. Now, I mentioned before they were one of those teams where it's they have a lot of young players, and it really depends on how some of these young players like Sengun perform, and it also depends on how well the players around Sengun, like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, are able to perform, and if they're able to be successful in this top-heavy Western Conference, not to mention the acquisition of Shepherd in the draft. And it's acquiring Reed Shepherd in the draft, he's in the conversations of being in the Rookie of the Year already, and the NBA season hasn't even started. So it's he's really proving to be a very talented player in the NBA. And you sort of need that when you have a really young team full of all of these young players. If you have somebody that has if you have a rookie, I guess you could say, that is already being touted as a great player, then, if he progresses quickly, then there's a chance that your team could be even more decent than what they were in the previous season. And it's not like they were all that bad last season. They were I know they were they were third place in this draft, but they were 41-41 in this previous season. So it's not like they were that bad in the last season with the young pieces that they have. They were just neutral, and excuse me. But they're bringing back Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, and Cam Whitmore. So they do have the young core that they have. It's not really all that impressive. It's not a young core that makes you want to go wow, but it's it's pretty solid. And I think with acquiring the players that they recently got, I think they're pretty solid. Now, the next team that I would like to mention is the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, the Grizzlies they're a team that suffered from injury in the previous season. They didn't really have Ja Morant for as long as they would have liked in the last season, and because of that, their win-loss record had to suffer because of that. Now, they ended up going 27-55 in the last season, but I think with the acquisition of Ja, I think they're able to win roughly 50 games, maybe go 49-33, I would say. I think that's a pretty decent margin of victory, a win-loss record for them. They went 51-31 in 2023 and finished second in the Western Conference. Now, they ended up losing to the Lakers, which was unfortunate for the Memphis Grizzlies. But, when they have Ja Morant and when they have a really confident squad, the team knows how to get it done. So I feel like that's really important. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to start winning again when they end up getting Ja Morant back on the roster. And now the final team on this list is the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I don't think they're going to improve all that much from last season. But again, by improve that much, I mean be a playoff team, because they can definitely improve by there's definitely going to be improvement from last season, because of the fact that in last season they were one of the worst teams in the entire NBA. They ended up only winning 22 games last season, and it was the same record as when they didn't have Wemby in 2023. But I think for this season, they're going to end up going 33-49 as opposed to going 22-60. And Victor Wembanyama he's a legit All-NBA talent, and he has a legitimate All-NBA first-team case for this season. And if they can generate a really nice roster around Victor, they can be a very solid team. Now, that's just a prediction. They could be even better than the record that I just said, or they could be even worse. That's entirely up to them, because, I got no control over that stuff. But, let me know in the comments what you think is in store for these teams. But aside from that, we're going to go ahead and go into the fourth segment, where I talk about some basketball news, primarily talking about Tyronn Lue and his anticipations for the Clippers for next season. So I'll be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Clippers and how Tyronn Lue, quote, can't wait to prove people wrong about the Clippers. So just going to go ahead and, briefly explain like what the Clippers have been going through in this off season. So recently they've lost Paul George, and now the duo of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George has ended. It was disappointing. It was arguably one of the worst trades in NBA history. The trade, that sent Paul George to the Clippers is probably the worst trade in NBA history now. And looking back on it, now the Thunder have been able to acquire several talented players, and they have more talented players incoming in future drafts. But aside from that, the Clippers, again, they're in a very, very bad situation. This is the first time since acquiring Paul George in 2019 where they don't have any hopes. This is the first time since 2019 where there's like no expectations for this Clippers team, and nobody really expects them to be a very deep contending team, a challenging team, or a team to be taken seriously for next season. But Tyronn Lue, the head coach of the Clippers, thinks completely different. And the Clippers head coach Tyronn Lue has said, quote, when you lose a guy of Paul George's stature, instantly people think, oh, they can't win or they're not going to be competitive. Lue told ESPN Young Misuk, excuse me if I botched that name, but that just challenges me even more. Okay, people are counting us out, or people don't think we're going to be good. That right there just gives me an extra dose of motivation. I can't wait to prove everyone wrong. This is what he said. Now, it's been less than 8 months since the Clippers were the favorites to win in the entire Western Conference, believe it or not. Like, the Clippers at a time, when they got James Harden and, when Kawhi and Paul George, they were all playing together, they were, and even Russell Westbrook at a point, they were the favorites to win the Western Conference. And I think at one point they might have been co-favorites with the Boston Celtics to win it all. But it wasn't like they weren't that good last season, because they were the favorite at one point. It's just they fell off last season. Like, they started losing a bunch of games towards the end of the season, and that carried over into the postseason, into the series with the Dallas Mavericks, and that was it for them. And then they lost to Dallas in the first round. That was the first time that Dallas had ever beaten the Clippers in the postseason, and that caused Paul George to just be like, bye. But aside from, the losing consistently, or losing pretty often towards the end of the season, in the middle of the season when they were the favorites, they were on a 20-4 winning losing streak, and they looked very, very good. But a lot has happened since then, and besides losing Russell Westbrook and Paul George, they're following their first round loss, they sort of had to sit at home and watch younger teams like the Timberwolves, Thunder, and the Mavericks grow in confidence in the postseason, where they sort of sit in the same level of mediocrity that they had before they acquired Kawhi Leonard. It should be noted that when Kawhi Leonard plays, the Clippers have not gone nearly as far as they get when he doesn't play. I think that should be noted. Kawhi Leonard did not play in the season, or in the postseason, I should say, when the Clippers ended up going to the Western Conference Finals. That was all Paul George. And Kawhi, he always gets put on these good teams, and it's pretty interesting how he gets a lot of the credit, despite the fact that he doesn't deserve it. But all of those teams, they are probably going to be well, all the teams that I mentioned, the Timberwolves, the Thunder, and the Mavs, they're probably going to be a little bit better than they were last season. Again, time will tell, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be even better. And besides the other powerhouses, the Clippers, they also have to contend with the Nuggets, the Suns, the Kings, the Lakers, the Warriors, and also Ja Morant as the Grizzlies end up returning. And maybe even the Houston Rockets, who I mentioned before, could have a breakout season. But Lue, for some reason, he still thinks that this team has a chance, which is still kind of interesting. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this. And for the simple fact that we are short on time, I'm going to end this segment a little bit earlier than I normally would. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the final segment where I talk about an NBA player who I feel like doesn't deserve to win the MVP in a specific year. So I'll be right back after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, I'm going to be talking about a player who I feel like doesn't deserve to win the MVP in a specific year. Now, in the last segment, we did Magic Johnson, and we covered how in 1989 and 1990 I didn't feel like he deserved to win. Actually, wait, no, not in 1989, but in 1991, Magic Johnson did not deserve to win the MVP. Or right, no, it was in 1990. Excuse me, but yeah, in that year he did not deserve to win the MVP, and he also did not deserve to win the MVP in the year 1989. But when Magic ended up winning it in 1989, I thought Michael Jordan should have ended up winning it in both of those years. So if you're interested in hearing exactly what I thought about in that segment, then you can go ahead and look at that in the previous video or in the previous podcast, depending on which side you guys are on. So the next player that we're going to do is going to have to be either in the 80s or beyond. And yeah, there's a lot of players to choose from back then, but I couldn't really find many people in the 80s that I felt like didn't really deserve to win the MVP. So I had to go a little bit farther back to a player who recently passed away. So rest in peace to this man. And the guy that I'm talking about, unfortunately, is Bill Walton. Now, I have nothing but respect for Bill Walton. He is a fantastic player, but in my personal opinion, I don't think he should have won the MVP back in 1978. Now, in 1978, the Portland Trail Blazers, they were one of the best teams in the NBA. They just came off of winning a championship, and now they were having the best record in the entire 1978 NBA season, and they had the best team. Not only that, Bill Walton was their best player on that team, averaging 19, 13, and 5, which was one of the biggest reasons why he ended up winning the award. And he ended up winning the MVP, but the biggest issue, like in my opinion, as to why I don't think he deserved to win the MVP this season was because the amount of games that he played. In this season, Bill Walton ended up missing 24 games because of injury, which is, out of his control, but still, he missed 24 games, which was the most missed games by a player who won the MVP in NBA history. And personally, I would have given the MVP to the runner-up in George Gervin. He ended up winning the MVP. He didn't end up winning the MVP, but he ended up playing 82 games, and he averaged 27 points, 5 and 4 in those 82 games that he played. And not to mention, if you didn't want to give it to George Gervin, you could have also given it to someone like David Thompson, who ended up getting into third place. And he got into third place by playing 80 games and averaging 27, 5, and 5. So, either one of those two players put up really good stats. And, when you compare them to, Bill Walton's stats, the scoring production is so much better. And the rebounding production is it's vastly superior than, averaging, 4 or 5 rebounds in a season, or averaging 5 anywhere. But the assist count is also rather close. So it's would you rather have a huge, take in scoring and production and availability, or would you rather have a huge production in rebounding? And it didn't even matter that Bill Walton wasn't even seeing the court, because despite missing 24 games, the team was still able to be one of the best teams in the entire Western Conference. So it's not like they were, losing anything in this season. It's not like they were losing anything because of Bill Walton's absence, if let's say, for example, if the Blazers, if they weren't one of the best teams in the NBA that season, and let's say they were one of the maybe 4-seeded teams, because the maybe not even a 4 seed, but maybe they were a 3rd seed because their best player ended up missing maybe 10 or so games, and in every single one of those games, or in maybe just one of those games, they ended up winning. Maybe in just one of those games they ended up winning, but in the rest of the 9 they ended up losing. Then I would completely understand, wanting to. I would completely understand the situation of wanting to give that player the MVP, and maybe not wanting to give it to someone else, because it's literally in every single instance where the team was when you weren't there, your team was losing in most of the instances. So it's you kind of have to give that person the MVP then, in my opinion, because it's you gotta have them there if you want that team to win. Otherwise, it's you don't have a shot. Obviously, I think record counts, and I think availability counts as well, which is another reason why I think Bill Walton doesn't really deserve this MVP as opposed to any of those other players that I mentioned before, because again, production, it still matters. And again, the Blazers, they were one of the better teams that year. So it's you didn't even need him in some of these, in the 20 games that he missed. I didn't pull up the entirety of the season, so I can't really tell how many games that he missed resulted into losses. But I mean, again, the team won 58 games that season. I think you're okay with being the number. I think you're okay with missing a couple of games and being in the number 1 seed. I don't think I need to go and do a little deep dive into that. But I mean, I don't know, maybe I do. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to. But again, I would much rather have those two players as the MVP. Either that's just me personally, either George Gervin or David Thompson. And most of the time back in the day, centers would win the MVP because a lot of times, they're viewed as like the most important position and the best position to play in the NBA, and the better position that you like. If you wanted to win, you needed a center back in the day. So it was like that was the position back then. And you could argue that it's sort of swinging back and it's coming back, and because previously a center in this previous decade, a center has won, or a big man has won an MVP every single time. Giannis has won the MVP, and then right after that, Nikola Jokic ended up winning the MVP, and then Joel Embiid won it that one year, and then Jokic is winning it again. And we might want to say that the guards have expanded, and they've been the guard play has expanded, but like the centers, they've sort of reclaimed their dominance in winning most valuable player awards. But aside from that, let me know in the comments what you think of this. Do you think he deserves the award? Do you think he doesn't deserve the award? Again, my condolences go out to him and his family and things of that nature, but I personally don't think he deserved this MVP. But let me know in the comments what you guys think of my opinion and what you guys think of that little debate right there. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or you could use Super Chat. Just hit the $sign below the chat box and send in your message. It's guaranteed to get featured on the show. It's a great way to support our channel as well. And again, like I said before, if Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, GSMC podcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That's all I have for you today on this show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit.